Merhaba arkadaşlar. 4. saatimize hoş geldiniz. Şimdi kaldığımız yerden devam edelim bir önceki videomuzda. Nerede kaldıysak oradan devam ediyoruz. En son yere batan sarnıcını anlatmıştım sizlere. Basilica Cistern. Oradan kaldığımız yerden devam edeceğiz. Kısaca Topkapı Sarayı'nda anlattıktan sonra ilerleyeceğim. Evet. Topkapı Palace. Topkapı Sarayı. Topkapı is the subject of more beautiful stories than most of the world's museums put together. Sultans, ambitious courtiers, beautiful concubines, and scheming eunuchs lived and worked here between the 15th and 19th centuries, when it was the court of the Ottoman Empire. Visiting the palace's opulent pavilions, jewel-filled treasury, and sprawling harem gives a fascinating glimpse into their lives. Mehmed the Conqueror built the first stage of the palace shortly after the conquest in 1453 and lived here until his death in 1481. Subsequent sultans lived in this rarefied environment until the 19th century, when they moved to the ostentatious European-style palaces they built on the shores of the Bosphorus. Now, I want to talk about Istanbul Archaeology Museum. This superb museum showcases archaeological and artistic treasures from the Topkapı collections. Housed in 3 buildings, its exhibits include ancient artifacts, classical statuary, and an exhibition tracing Istanbul's history. There are many highlights, but the sarcophagi from the royal necropolis of Sidon are particularly striking. Sarcophagi bu arada arkadaşlar, sarkofagus lahit demek, sarcophagi, lahitler onun çoğulu anlamına geliyor. Yani sarkofagus kelimesi eskon olarak çoğul yapılmıyor. Sarcophagi olarak çoğul oluyor. Yani sarkophagi dediğimde lahitler demiş oluyorum, tamam. The complex has 3 main parts, but here I want to talk about archaeology museum part. On the opposite side of the courtyard of this place, there is an imposing neoclassical building housing an extensive collection of classical statuary and sarcophagi, plus a sprawling exhibit documenting Istanbul's history. The main draws are 2 dimly lit rooms where the museum's major treasures, which are the sarcophagi from the royal necropolis of Sidon and surrounding area, are displayed. These sarcophagi were unearthed in 1887 by Osman Hamdi Bey in Sidon, which is in modern-day Lebanon. The Alexander sarcophagus and mourning women sarcophagus are truly extraordinary works of art. In the next room is an impressive collection of ancient grave-cult sarcophagi from Syria, Lebanon, Thessalonica, and Ephesus. Beyond that is a room called the columned sarcophagi of Anatolia, filled with amazingly detailed sarcophagi dating from between 140 and 270 AD. Many of these look like tiny temples or residential buildings. Don't mistake Sidamara sarcophagi from Konya. Further rooms contain Lycian monuments and examples of Anatolian architecture from antiquity. The museum's Anatolia and Troy through the ages and neighboring cultures of Anatolia, Cyprus, Syria, and Palestine's exhibitions are upstairs. Is a fascinating, albeit dusty exhibition called Istanbul Through the Ages that traces the city's history through its neighborhoods during different periods: Archaic, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman. It is likely that these exhibitions will be overhauled in the near future. Next, I would like to talk about Grand Bazaar, Kapalı Çarşı, as is known as Kapalı Çarşı in Turkish. Grand Bazaar is a colorful and chaotic bazaar and it is the heart of the old city, and it has been so for centuries. Starting as a small vaulted bedestan, which means warehouse, built by the order of Mehmet the Conqueror in 1461, it grew to cover a vast area as laneways between the bedestan, neighboring shops, and hans. Han means caravanserai in English, were roofed, and the market assumed the sprawling labyrinthine form that it retains today. When here, be sure to peep through the doorways to discover hidden hands, veer down narrow laneways to watch artisans at work, and wander the main thoroughfares to differentiate treasures from touristic. It's obligatory to drink lots of tea, compare price after price, and try your hand at the art of bargaining. Allow at least 3 hours for your visit, because some travelers spend 3 days. And now, I would like to talk about Süleymaniye Mosque, which is one of the biggest in our country. The Süleymaniye crowns one of Istanbul's 7 hills and dominates the Golden Horn, providing a landmark for the entire city. Though it's not the largest of the Ottoman mosques, it is certainly one of the grandest and most beautiful. It's also unusual in that many of its original külliye means mosque complex buildings, have been retained and sympathetically adapted for reuse. Commissioned by Süleyman I, Süleyman the Magnificent, the Süleymaniye was the 4th imperial mosque built in Istanbul, and it certainly lives up to its patron's nickname. The mosque and its surrounding buildings were designed by Mimar Sinan, the most famous and talented of all imperial architects. Sinan's tomb is just outside the mosque's walled garden, next to a disused medrese building. The mosque was built between 1550 and 1557. Its setting and plan are particularly pleasing, featuring gardens and a 3-sided forecourt with a central domed ablutions fountain. The 4 minarets with their 10 beautiful sherefes, means balconies, are said to represent the fact that Süleyman was the 4th of the Osmanlı sultans to rule the city and the 10th sultans after the establishment of the empire. In the garden behind the mosque is a terrace offering lovely views of the Golden Horn. The street underneath once housed the Külliyes Arasta, which means street of shops, and which was built into the retaining wall of the terrace. Close by was a 5-level mülazim, and it means preparatory school. Inside, the building is breathtaking in its size and pleasing in its simplicity. Sinan incorporated the 4 buttresses into the walls of the building. The result is wonderfully transparent and highly reminiscent of Ayasofya, especially as the dome is nearly as large as the one that crowns the Byzantine Basilica. The mihrab is covered in fine Iznik tiles, and other interior decoration includes window shutters inlaid with mother of pearl, gorgeous stained glass windows, painted mukarnas, which means corbels with honeycomb detail, a new and quite spectacular persimmon-colored floor carpet, painted pendentives and medallions featuring fine calligraphy. Now I want to talk about the külliye of this mosque. Süleyman specified that his mosques should have the full complement of public services, which means imaret, in English it's soup kitchen, medreses, hamam, taphane, which means inn for traveling dervishes, Darüşşifa means hospital, etc. Today the imaret, with its charming garden courtyard, courtyard houses the Darüzzifaye restaurant, and it's a lovely place to enjoy a chai, tea. On its right-hand side is a taphane that was being restored at the time of research, and on its left side is Lale Bahçesi, tulip garden, a popular tea garden set in a sunken courtyard. Yes. I would also like to mention Spice Bazaar, which is Mısır Çarşısı in our language. In English, it's Spice Bazaar. Vividly colored spices are displayed alongside jewel-like lokum, Turkish delight, at this Ottoman-era marketplace, providing eye candy for the thousands of tourists and locals who make their way here every day. As well as spices, stalls sell caviar, dried herbs, nuts, and dried fruits. The number of stalls selling tourist trinkets increases annually, yet this remains a great place to stock up on edible souvenirs, share a few jokes with the vendors, and marvel at the well-preserved buildings. Okay. And now, I cannot finish it without mentioning Galata Bridge, Galata Köprüsü. To experience Istanbul at its most magical, you should walk across the Galata Bridge at sunset. At this time, the historic Galata Tower is surrounded by shrieking seagulls. The mosques atop the 7 hills of the city are silhouetted against a soft red-pink sky, and the evocative scent of apple tobacco wafts out of the nargile, which means water pipe, cafes under the bridge. Well, during the day, the bridge carries a constant flow of Istanbul people crossing to and from Beyoğlu and Eminönü, a handful or two of hopeful anglers trailing their lines into the waters below, and a constantly changing procession of street vendors hawking everything from fresh-baked simits to Rolex ripoffs. Underneath, restaurants and cafes serve drinks and food all day and night. Come here to enjoy a beer and nargile while watching the ferries making their way to and from the Eminönü and Karaköy ferry docks. The present, quite ugly bridge was built in 1992 to replace an iron structure dating from 1909 to 1912, which in turn had replaced 2 earlier structures. The iron bridge was famous for the ramshackle fish restaurants, tea houses, and nargile joints that occupied the dark recesses beneath its roadway, but it had a major flaw. It floated on pontoons that blocked the natural flow of water and kept the Golden Horn from flushing itself free of pollution. In the late 1980s, the municipality started to draw up plans to replace it with a new bridge that will allow the water to flow. A fire expedited these plans in the early 1990s, and the new bridge was built a short time afterwards. The remains of the old, much-loved bridge were moved further up the Golden Horn near Hasköy. Okay. This is the end of my Istanbul presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it. There are many more things actually to tell about Istanbul, but it's the district of Sultanahmet, and I will continue with other places such as Beyoğlu. I want to say a few things about Beyoğlu too, and then finish. The suburb of Beyoğlu rises from the shoreline north of Galata Bridge and incorporates both Taksim Meydanı, Taksim Square, and the city's grandest boulevard, İstiklal Caddesi, İstiklal Street. In the mid-19th century, it was known as Pera, and acknowledged as the European quarter of town. Diplomats and international traders lived and worked here, and the streets were showcases for the latest European fashions and fads. All this changed in the decades after the Republic was formed. Embassies moved to Ankara, the glamorous shops and restaurants closed, the grand buildings crumbled, and Beyoğlu took on a decidedly sleazy air. Fortunately, the 90s brought about a rebirth, and Beyoğlu is once again the heart of modern Istanbul, full of galleries, cafes, and boutiques. Here, hip new restaurants and bars open almost nightly, and the streets showcase cosmopolitan Turkey at its best. Put simply, if you miss Beyoğlu, you haven't seen Istanbul. The best way to get a feel for this side of town is to spend an afternoon or a day exploring by foot. If you are based in Sultanahmet, catch the tram to Kabataş and the connecting funicular up to Taksim Meydanı. Then work your way down İstiklal Caddesi, exploring its many side streets along the way. At the foot of the boulevard is Tünel Square, Tünel Meydanı. Follow Galipdede Caddesi, Galipdede Street downhill, and you will be able to explore the historic neighborhood of Galata before walking across Galata Bridge to Eminönü, from where you can catch a tram or walk back up to Sultanahmet. All up, it's a walk of at least 2 hours from Taksim Meydanı, but dedicating a full day will be more rewarding. Okay, this is it for our 4th video. We will continue in our 5th video. I'll see you there. Bye, see you.